Good, how are you?
Anything is that basically
Top
yeah,
man. When, man?
Now. Okay.
Just in case, take that down because keep cluttering something. So we take it down. If you don't mind. Yeah, yeah. Where are you from? Oh.
What you gonna talk about?
Yeah, yeah.
That's crazy. NBC nightly news people are here too.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is all like time. I want to hear the comments. Local guy, man.
Come a long way.
Yes, I did. But it's such a pretty day. It's a nice drive.
Heard Crazy West was gonna be here.
My name is Elaine, and you are?
I'm Maya.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Not obviously. Illegal. I can answer that. Here he comes.
Say some good stuff. I know you will. All right.
Good afternoon.
Hi. Yep, go ahead. Thanks.
Progress can be scary for some, but the fact of the matter is Virginia has become a source of great progress over recent years, recent decades, and recent centuries. Virginia, of course, has been the birthplace of American democracy, but it has also been the birthplace of American slavery. And in each generation, we make a decision about which one defines us here in this great state. Whether it's being at the forefront of justice, liberty, and equality for all, or whether it's one that pulls us back into some of the worst sins of our past. Each generation must make a deliberate decision about what defines us as Virginians. And during recent decades, what we have seen is that progress is winning. We have become a more inclusive and just state than at any point in our history. We've become a more diverse state, 20% African American, 20% people with roots from all over the world. And we've become a stronger state culturally and economically because of it. But we do continue to have deep issues of racial inequality and injustice. In Virginia today, the median net worth of an African American family remains 1/11 that of the median white family. We continue to see disproportionate rates of incarceration, disproportionate rates in education funding, and otherwise. But Virginia continues to push back against that and demand to be once again at the forefront of justice and equality, and we've seen that from community leaders to elected officials across the Commonwealth. We've seen that as well in the fact that we were the only Southern state, the only former Confederate state to reject Donald Trump in this last election, and to do so in overwhelming fashion. Once again, here in Charlottesville, we have seen that the diverse and broad coalition of people that want Virginia to be an inclusive state far outranks those who want to raise up the torches of hate and division. So we must continue to stand strong. But this is not just a community by community fight. This is a fight that involves all of us across the state. And now is a moment for us to figure out how we can come together, how we can heal old wounds, and not just healing them by acting like they did not exist in the first place, but by addressing them directly. I've worked in many countries that have worked through civil wars and worked through past atrocities. And those countries that emerged strongest from those periods are those that made a deliberate and intentional effort to come together and heal afterwards. I believe there is room for a statewide commission on racial healing and transformation here in Virginia. One that can bring communities together honestly talk both about how we see our history and how we see our present. And the state must continue to have that reflected in the acts that we sponsor through state action. That includes how we remember our history. And those that think, as I do, that it is time to retire traditions like honoring Lee Jackson Day every year. We must understand that how we tell our past says a great deal about where we are going with our future. As I said before, Virginia, as the birthplace of both American democracy and American slavery, can make those decisions. And right now, I believe the vast majority of Virginians across the Commonwealth want to be defined by that bright future that keeps us in the forefront of opportunity and liberty for all, that leaves no race or region behind. I think we can do that by engaging as many other countries have, and how we bring people together in a commission of this kind. Not long ago, then Governor Nikki Haley spoke during a similar debate that was going on in South Carolina. And she said, "My hope is that by removing this symbol that divides us, we can move forward as a state in harmony. 150 years after the end of the Civil War, that time has come." I think this is an opportunity for us to see this as something we can do together. There's a reason many people tune into the History Channel on a regular basis, and that's because how we continue to hear and understand our history from the past is part of what defines us going forward. And I will quote one more person and why I believe this is important, both in the support of such a commission and how we remember our holidays. Quote, "I think it wiser, moreover, not to keep open the sores of war, but to follow the examples of those nations who endeavored to obliterate the marks of civil strife and to commit to oblivion the feelings it engendered." That quote is from Robert E. Lee. Thank you.
Mr. Perriello, here's one other Lee quote. Could you read it? It's a really good one. I think you'll really like it.
Thank you very much.
That we appreciate it. He believed that maybe losing was the thing to do. So. Any other questions?
Yeah, I want to ask about, do you have any response to the protests that were held in the parks over the weekend? I saw you tweeted out a couple of things, but do you have any direct response you want to tell those groups that were here?
Yes, we do not stand and we do not support that hate as Virginia values. I think you saw in the response that was far, far stronger of those in Charlottesville and across the Commonwealth who believe in an inclusive Virginia and a just Virginia. We believe that these are the last gasps of a dying and racist ideology, and the way those are defeated are by being honest about our history and how we address them. I think when we come together and talk honestly about our history, it's something that can be something we celebrate together. For example, at the moment of the Civil War and its completion, a majority of human beings in Charlottesville and Albemarle County were African American. Their experience of the Civil War is one that is incredibly important for us to understand as we tell the story of what it meant at Appomattox for the country to come back together, and on Juneteenth for liberation to finally begin to be real for so many Virginians. We can see this and own this as part of our Virginia history to celebrate, as long as we own that together and do so honestly.
I want to bounce off of that. You're from Charlottesville. What did the statue mean for you growing up, and how do you view the statue now?
I think one of the things that was struggle for me was how much it didn't have to mean something to me, and I think that was from a position of privilege. As someone who understood and read through history and could walk by this park without necessarily thinking of it in a way that could be deeply offensive to my neighbors. And I think as we go through this sort of a commission on racial healing and transformation, part of the value of that is to try to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes and understand how they might see that history themselves. Growing up in the Albemarle County schools, which were excellent schools, our Reconstruction period only got about 3 paragraphs in the textbooks, and it was very much from the Dunning School of American History. It's important for us to dig back into that and get a more accurate read, and it helps us understand how we move forward to today. So I think this is something we can see as a collective experiment together to best understand our history and understand how everyone may have experienced that period. As General Lee often talked about, the Civil War was a tragedy. This was not about heroism. This was a great human tragedy on so many levels. And from it, what we wanted to emerge was a period of human liberation. But the Reconstruction period that followed was very complicated. So I think we in Charlottesville need to continue to explore that history so that we can better understand our present.
Okay, thank you.
Quick questions. What did you think when you saw the torches, with the group of people in the torches, and what does that say about Charlottesville?
When we saw those pictures of torches, we saw exactly what they wanted us to see. They wanted to harken back to a period of the Klan and a period of hate and white supremacy, and they wanted us to be scared. And I think what you saw from leaders across Charlottesville was that we're not going to let that happen. We are not going to let them bully the vulnerable. We will come out with great leaders, both elected and community leaders, and important that it's people of all races that speak up and call out this hate for what it is. And in response, make sure that all of those in our community feel like they are less vulnerable today than they were before. But we must take this seriously, particularly when we see this kind of hate enabled from the very most powerful person in the land, who seems to dabble in racist, demagoguing language in ways that everybody understands exactly what he means, from those who want to imbibe that hate to those who are scared of that hate. And I think that's why more than ever we need leaders across Virginia and across our communities to call it out for what it is. I was disappointed this past weekend that while that sort of activity was going on, you didn't see a peep from Donald Trump or his host, Reverend Falwell Jr., in calling this out for what it was. What you did see was a grassroots support for the idea of inclusion. So we saw exactly the images they wanted us to see, and I think we countered with images of love and inclusion that will win the day.
You called for a commission, but are you comfortable to say yes or no? If someone asks, should we move them? Are you comfortable saying yes or no?
Oh, I've supported that decision before. I think it's ultimately a local decision, and they went through that process, and I strongly support the decision that was made. But I think the process is as important as the decision itself, and that's part of what we've learned from how other countries have gone through this. It's the conversations that are had about our history and about understanding why certain symbols and statues are seen differently through different eyes that are part of why we need to go in that direction. As I said earlier, I also think symbols like continuing to have a Lee Jackson Day on the books, the only one in the country, is something that also is dividing us instead of bringing us together. We should be understanding the moments of Appomattox and Juneteenth and others that are a crucial part of our history that bring us back together instead of continuing to celebrate what divides us.
And what about the city's decision compared to state law?
In what sense?
That most legal evils have said, you look at the state law, you cannot move a war statue or memorial, including Civil War. I think it's 15.2-1812.
So this is why it's about the process of the conversation being so important. Obviously, we're a rule of law country, so things have to work within that. But I think there's been a really deliberate process. I think people on different sides came to interesting conclusions between removing the statue or changing a plaque of how it's memorialized or leaving it alone. And that's exactly how this process should work out, is through a set of conversations that are honest and unfiltered about exactly where we're going to go as a community.
If the state Supreme Court were to rule that according to state law it cannot be moved, what would be your plan then?
Well, as I said, we're a rule of law country, so you have to respect the law, but I think that doesn't prevent you from making the best argument you can about where a community should go. And I think, again, that's one of the reasons we want to do this as a statewide commission, is that as these continue to flare up as local struggles, it can play out in a certain way that can be reactive. And I think what we want is to bring in historians, bring in mediators, bring in others who've worked on these sorts of projects in the past to see how we can learn from those local efforts that have been done so far and build on those successes and learn from the failures of how we can create a more inclusive and honest history going forward.
What exactly would your commission do?
So I think this is what we're going to continue to discuss with all of the stakeholders as we go forward. I'm probably rare in politics as having spent more time as a peace negotiator than a politician. And part of what I want to draw on with that experience is how you can bring people together in other countries like I've done who've literally been fighting each other. Here, for the most part, we're just divided politically, but we are deeply divided. And I think there's a big hunger out there right now to figure out how we can build some bridges across regional divides, partisan divides, and racial divides. And I think there is no shortcut to that. That's one of the things I've learned from being a peace negotiator in conflict zones. It does take honest conversation and trust building, and I think figuring out how we can build on efforts that have already been happening in Charlottesville and in Richmond and other communities is part of how we can scale this up. All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Tom.